morning to everyone. So today we are going to learn about the next part of the respiration. Before going to the concept, last class I gave few questions about the previous concept. So let us recap those questions first. Who discovered oxygen? Joseph Priestley. Who named oxygen? Lavoisier. Okay. In terms of Lavoisier, which is fixed air or chalky acid air? The answer is CO2. And which is called respirable air? Oxygen is called as a respirable air. What is vitiated air? The air which has very less percentage of oxygen is called as vitiated air. And who wrote the book Animal Physiology? The answer is John Draper. And what are the steps or events of the respiration? So there are 5 steps are there in the respiration. What are the steps or events of the respiration? There are 5 steps or events in the respiration. The first step is breathing. Second step, gaseous exchange at lungs level. And the third step is gas transported by blood. And fourth step is gaseous exchange at tissue level. And the last step is cellular respiration. In the today class, we are going to discuss about what is breathing and what is the pathway of air and mechanism of human respiration. We will discuss about the first point, breathing. So what is breathing? Breathing means inhalation and exhalation of the air. Nothing but taking and out of the air is called breathing. So taking air into the body is called inhalation. Inhalation also called inspiration. In the same way, leaving air from the lungs to outside. Leaving air is called exhalation. Exhalation also called expiration. So it's a very simple process. Taking air and leaving air outside is called as the breathing. We know that air is a mixture of gases. So during inhalation we will take all gases into the body, but especially when it reaches the lungs, oxygen only will enter into the alveoli. From the alveoli it enter into the blood capillaries. At the same time, whatever carbon dioxide is formed in the tissues will reaches the capillaries. From the capillaries it again enter into the lungs. From the lungs again this carbon dioxide will be sent out in the form of exhalation. So to know that carbon dioxide is released during respiration, there is a small experiment. So let us see that experiment. Just take 2 test tubes. In the 2 test tubes, arrange the 2 tubes and then just leave your breathing air into it. So one test tube take the lime water and another test tube take the water. So when we leave the breathing air, so the air will enter into both the test tubes. Here the breathing air is showing in the form of blue color. So when it enters into both the test tubes, where the lime water is there, in that test tube it turns into milky white color. Whereas in other test tube, there is no change in the color. So here, the lime water turns into milky white because due to the presence of carbon dioxide in this test tube. So by this we can understand carbon dioxide is released during respiration. Why here it turns into milky white color? Because lime water actually it consists calcium hydroxide. So when it reacts with CO2, it turns into CaCO3. Because of that reason, it turns into milky white color. So by this we can conclude that the breathing out air consists carbon dioxide. We will move on to the second step, that is passage of air. So as I said, after breathing, air enter into the respiratory system. So how the air enters from the nostril till the blood, now we will discuss. First it enters into nostrils. From the nostril it moves on to nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli, and finally the air reaches the blood. So now one by one we will go in detail. So let us see first nostrils. So what are the nostrils? This is a very visible parts to everyone. These 2 are called as nostrils. So these 2 nostrils, we have 2 nostrils. These 2 nostrils are opens into nasal cavity. So basically we have 2 nasal passages here. So when you talk about nasal cavity inside it have some hair and it also very moist in the nature. So here what is the use of this air? First we will discuss. This air of the nasal cavity is useful to arrest the dust particles. It is useful to arrest the dust particles because when we inhale the air, so along with the air, many dust particles will enter. So those dust particles will be absorbed by this air, and then it won't allow those dust particles to go into the respiratory passage. So that is the use of the air. Now let us go for the moist. Why it is in the moist? Because it have a special membrane called as mucous membrane. So when we keep your finger inside your nasal passage, you can feel it. It is very moist in the nature always because of the mucus. So same here, the mucus also, the first thing it is useful, same it is also useful to arrest the dust particles. At the same time it is also useful to make the hot air into cool, because when we inhale, sometimes maybe we inhale all sort of air. So if we inhale very hot air, it may damage the inner passage. So this mucus, as it is of the moist nature, it is useful to cool that air, and then it is equals to our body temperature, and then it sends to the remaining passage of the respiratory system. So that is the use of the air and moist in the nasal cavity. So when you come to the nasal cavity, here I want to give you one more point. We have actually two cavities. Here this is called nasal cavity, and just below that we have an oral cavity. This cavity also called as buccal cavity. So here we have nasal cavity for air passage. At the same time, below that we have another cavity. It is called buccal cavity. Buccal cavity useful for food passage, and nasal cavity useful for air passage. So when you talk about the nasal cavity first, these nasal cavities, we have two nasal cavities. These two nasal cavities are separated by middle we have a membrane. You can feel it also. So this membrane is called as septum. The two nasal passages are separated by septum, whereas when you come to the buccal cavity, so here we have nasal cavity, down we have oral or buccal cavity. These two are separated by the hard structure here. This hard structure we call as palate. So please remember, nasal cavity are separated by septum, whereas nasal cavity and buccal cavity are separated by a bony structure called as the palate. Yeah, so please remember here, both the nasal cavities are separated by septum, whereas nasal cavity and buccal cavity are separated by palate. So now from the nasal cavity, air enters into pharynx. So let us see what is pharynx. Pharynx is the junction. It is a junction of both food and air passage. Food and air passage. So as we all know that food, so at the time of swallowing, and air means at the time of breathing. So pharynx play a vital role at the time of swallowing and at the time of breathing. Pharynx play really very important role. So let us discuss how it controls swallowing and breathing, even though it is a common passage for both. So as I said, pharynx is the junction. Actually, when you talk about just the easy picture for you. So this is air passage. Air will goes in such a manner, and this whole cavity we call as buccal cavity or oral cavity, and these two are the nasal cavities. So but here both will reach us here. So from here food will enters into food pipe, and now the air goes in this manner. This is food pipe, and this is air pipe. So this is also called food pipe, also called esophagus, and air pipe also called as trachea. So now this junction, now we are discussing about this junction. This junction we call as a pharynx. So while we are taking food, here basically you all can notice that we have a special structure here. So when you open your mouth widely, you can see inside there is a triangular shaped structure, triangular shaped part. That part we call as epiglottis. So when we open your mouth very widely, you can see inside a triangular structure that is called epiglottis. So while you are taking food, so immediately it turns like this and it closes the windpipe. It turns like this and it closes the windpipe and allows the food to go into the esophagus. Now you can see this image to know the functioning of epiglottis very clearly. So during breathing time it allows passage of air into the trachea. At the same time while we are swallowing food, by that time this epiglottis closes the trachea and allows the food into food pipe. In that way epiglottis play very important role for the passage of both food and air into the respective passages. So now the air from pharynx enters into the larynx. See now what is larynx? Larynx also called as voice box because it is used to produce sounds. Let us see once. So here after pharynx, after the junction, so now we have a tube. This is called trachea. At the starting of the trachea we have a box like structure. So this is called as larynx. So once the air enters into this larynx, it vibrates and produces sounds. Because of that larynx only we can able to speak. If you touch like this, you can feel your vibrations of the larynx. So by that we can understand how it produces sounds. So from the larynx, now the air enters into trachea. Trachea also called as windpipe. So when we talk about trachea, this trachea having C-shaped cartilaginous muscles. So these C-shaped, this is called trachea or also called windpipe. It's purely consists so many C-shaped cartilaginous rings. So these rings are used to prevent the trachea from collapsing. So now from trachea the air enters into bronchi. Bronchi nothing but this trachea divides into two branches. Each branch we call as a bronchus. So bronchus is the singular, bronchi is the plural. So now these two bronchi also consist C-shaped cartilaginous rings to prevent it from the collapsing. So now the air from bronchi enters into bronchioles. Bronchioles nothing but again this bronchi divides into many small branches. So these small branches we call as a bronchioles. So in this finally air reaches the bronchioles. Actually from bronchi to the bronchioles, everything is present inside the lungs. So the rest of the part of lungs filled with small air-like sacs. So these are called alveoli. Alveoli. Actually alveolus singular. If you talk about one, we can say alveolus. Plural is the alveoli. So in that way finally air reaches the alveoli. So from the alveoli, now it is complete. Lungs are again surrounded with so many blood vessels. Fine blood vessels, we call them as blood capillaries. So now from the alveoli, oxygen will enter into the blood capillaries. So from the blood capillaries, whatever carbon dioxide is present, that will enter into the alveoli. In this way, alveoli play a vital role in exchange of the gaseous So passage of air completed. So now we move on to the next concept, mechanism of respiration. So before going to the mechanism, first we have to know how the lungs are inhale and exhale the air. So to inhale or exhale the air, actually when you come to the lungs, we can't see the lungs, but we can feel how the air enters. So while you are inhale the air and while you are exhale the air, we can able to feel how the air enters in our body. Actually lungs neither draw the air nor push it out by themselves. So it takes the help of two important parts. So one is chest wall and other one diaphragm. These two play very important role for the inhalation and exhalation of the gaseous. Especially when you talk about chest wall, this chest wall is made with ribs and muscles, and whereas diaphragm, when you talk about diaphragm, it is a very flexible, delicate membrane which is present just below the lungs and play a very important role in the exhalation and inhalation of the air. So now when we move into the mechanism, so first we need to know that the chest wall, diaphragm are very important for the proper functioning of inhalation and the exhalation. The mechanism of breathing, basically it have two steps. One is inhalation and another step is exhalation. So either in the inhalation or exhalation, chest wall and diaphragm play very important role. So during inhalation time, in the sense while we are taking air into the body, what actually going to be happen, we'll discuss now. Actually lungs are like this. So bottom we have diaphragm and this whole part we can say as a chest cavity. This is chest cavity and bottom we have diaphragm. Actually diaphragm is in dome shape. It is in dome shape. It is actually diaphragm. So this whole part, whole cavity we can say as a chest cavity. So during inhalation time, actually first thing, diaphragm contracts. So when it contracts, it just lowers. It lowers like this, slightly it lowers. So first step, diaphragm contracts. So when diaphragm contracts, slightly it lower, or we can say it is slightly it moves down. The diaphragm slightly moved down. So when it moves down, what happens? Then the chest volume of chest cavity increases. The volume of chest cavity increases. And during that time, so the inside it have more space now. So air pressure reduces. Air pressure reduces, or we can say less air pressure. We can say that there is a very less air pressure inside. So now more air rushes into the lungs. Air rushes into the lungs. So in this way, air enters into the lungs during the inhalation process. So let me say once again. So during the inhalation time, first the diaphragm contracts. When it contracts, it slightly pushes down. So when it pushes down, the volume of chest cavity increases. So when the volume of chest cavity increases, obviously inside air pressure will be very less. So then it allows more air rushes inside the lungs. So this process we call as inhalation. So when you talk about exhalation, it is quite opposite. During exhalation time, what's going to be happen? Diaphragm relaxed. Diaphragm relaxed. So when it relaxed, what happens? Again it reaches its original dome shape. So when it comes to the, so then it moves, diaphragm moves up. So then obviously the chest cavity, volume of chest cavity decreases. Volume of chest cavity decreases. and then obviously inside pressure will be, air pressure will be more. So air pressure will be more. So then now more air rushes out of the lungs. So in this way, during exhalation, air come outside. So during exhalation, once again, the diaphragm relaxes. When it relaxes, what happens? It again reaches its original dome shape. So when it reaches the dome shape, obviously volume of chest cavity slightly decreases. So then the inside, more pressure will be created inside the lungs. Then the more air rushes out of the lungs. So in this way, during inhalation and exhalation, air will enters and leave the lungs. Once you see this video, you can clearly understand the mechanism of breathing. So during inhalation, see how the air enters. So during the, when the air is entering, how the diaphragm contracts and how it moves down and how the volume of chest cavity is increasing and how the pressure increases and finally how the air is coming out. At the same time, during exhalation also, the diaphragm relaxes and reaches the dome shape and the volume of chest cavity decreases and the air pressure increases inside the lungs and then it is going to come outside. So I hope you clearly understood the concept now. Now we completed breathing and passage of air and mechanism of respiration. So at the end, I want to ask you again few questions. So try to answer my questions. So what is palate and which part separates the both nasal cavities and how the air move from the nostrils to the blood and what is the junction for both food and air passage and what is the mechanism of respiration. So what's going to be happen during inhalation and what's going to be happen during exhalation. So try to answer all these questions. I hope you all answered my questions. In the next class we are going to discuss about structure of the lungs, exchange of gases at alveoli, cellular respiration. Keep watching. Thank you.